So let me say right off the bat, I loved Red Sparrow. I think the critics are being very unfair. For me, it's right up there with best movies of the year so far. Obviously not too high a bar, it's pretty early and there haven't been that many great movies, but for me, this and Black Panther would probably be right up there at the top for movies that I thought were great, that I'd want to watch again. Now, the basic premise, she's a ballerina, ballet dancer, and I loved the imagery of this. Now, it was used to perhaps best effect in Black Swan, and I thought it was different but used just as well here, where you see the imagery of the ballet and this old aristocratic elegance and opulence, and then you pair that with its depiction of Russia, which is very bleak, almost Civil War era. Sorry, not Civil War, terrible, terrible, Cold War era Soviet Union, and you pair that and the spycraft with this pomp and circumstance of the ballet. I thought it was excellent. Now she gets hurt, and then she goes to this super spy school to become a Sparrow. Now, a lot of people are complaining that, well, this wasn't realistic spy school. It was sexist because she didn't learn how to use weapons and fight and all this useful spy stuff. I completely disagree. I think this kind of a spy school was way more realistic of what a spy school would actually be like, and the skill set that real world spies who operate in the real world, not in action movies where you have these big shootouts with people and it's all about weapons and fighting. No, that's movie spies. Actual real spies, it's all about manipulating people, having different identities, being able to be a chameleon and become whatever your mark or target wants you to be. And I thought that this was so well done in conveying that. So at the spy school, one of the first things you do is you lose any sense of your own identity. You lose your name, any attachments to anything that made you you, any kind of distinctive personality. You want to wipe that away and go in with a completely blank slate when you start your spy career. And what I thought was interesting, one, you could see this kind of a meta commentary on how in the West, at least apparently, there's a great emphasis on individuality and people having personalities and identity. And in Russia, in particular Soviet Union, which again, this was very reminiscent of that, there's this emphasis on community and sacrifice, and in some sense, you're just a cog in the machine and you lose any sense of individuality. So you could interpret it that way, but I interpret it as, it's very interesting that it seemed like at the school, what they were basically doing was creating psychopaths. Now, one of the interesting things about psychopaths, oftentimes they feel like they have no inherent essence and no identity, no real personality. They're just chameleons, and they just kind of blend to whatever environment they're in, and also whoever they're with, whatever they're trying to get out of someone, whoever they're with, they can just become kind of a fantasy version of that person. They can see what that person wants most, and they can just become that, because again, they have no core essence. They can become what anyone wants them to be. And then another part of losing your identity at this school, it was part of losing any hangups and any insecurities you had. And again, very interesting corollary to psychopaths, where they don't really have hangups about a lot of things, but in particular sex and sexuality was a huge part of this school. And they're able to use sex as a tool, a weapon, whatever they want to use it as. They don't feel the same kind of emotions around it as other people do. They don't feel the same kind of insecurity. So I thought it was very interesting, and a great scene when she's in class with that guy and she kind of, I won't spoil it too much, but she does kind of assert herself, and I thought it was a really great scene that, again, a lot of critics aren't giving it any credit for any kind of feminist undertones or subtext. I wouldn't even call it undertones or subtext. It's like explicit. She said, oh, he's all about power. So I don't really understand why critics aren't giving it more credit. I think it's unfair. And let me talk about the violence for a sec. Now, this wasn't an action movie. It wasn't action-packed. If you go in expecting something like Atomic Blonde, you're going to be disappointed. But I thought the action that they did have was fantastic. It felt so real, so gritty, so brutal. Now, let me compare it to Atomic Blonde, because I think, obviously, comparisons are going to be made. Now, Atomic Blonde, the action was better. There was just more of it, and there was better action. And Charlize Theron seemed like more of a badass, empowered super spy. So like, I get that. And also James McAvoy, he was in some sense a more charismatic character than any of the characters we saw here. But I think the acting as a whole was stronger here. Almost everyone gave fantastic performances in this one. Atomic Blonde, the look was much more stylized, and in some ways it was aesthetically better. But I thought this had a really awesome look as well that was totally its own. And I think this was just a better, tighter story. So honestly, Atomic Blonde had a lot going for it, and I don't want to take away from that. There were great things about Atomic Blonde that amazing fight scenes, but I think this was actually a better movie. Now let me talk about the different actors. Matthias Schoenaerts looks exactly like Vladimir Putin. He's Uncle Ivan in the movie. Joel Edgerton, I like him more every time I see him. He's probably one of my favorite actors. I thought he was great in this, had great chemistry with Jennifer Lawrence. Now I'll talk about Jennifer Lawrence briefly. So I'm not a big fan of Jennifer Lawrence. The movie Joy is one of my least favorite movies of all time, largely because of her. I just find her very wooden in her acting, but in a movie like this, where she's playing a more robotic role, I think she really excels and is great at it. One of my favorite movies of hers is Silver Linings Playbook. She was playing someone with a disorder where she socially was a bit awkward and kind of robotic, and I thought she killed it, and I thought she gave a great performance there. And this may sound like a backhanded compliment. It's, oh, she's great at playing roles where she doesn't really have to act very much. I don't think that's fair. No, I think there's definitely, you can play a role where you have to communicate a lot by not acting very expressively and not showing a lot of emotion. And I think she's able to do that in this movie. I think she is a compelling protagonist, and she is able to convey a lot of feeling without being too over the top in her acting, and I thought she does a good job. So I was surprised. Again, not a big fan of Jennifer Lawrence, expected I wasn't going to like this movie because of it, but no, I thought she did great. And now I'm going to try to explain the last half of the movie. I don't think it's entirely clear. So Jennifer Lawrence, she has two tasks. One is to find the mole, a person who's Russian, who's a traitor and is giving information, and then her second task is she's meeting with this woman named Boucher, and the woman Boucher, she's an American traitor giving information to the Russians, so she's supposed to meet with Boucher, and she does, and get this data that's secrets from the US and bring it back to Russia. Now, at this point, she's flipped sides, and she's working with the Americans. So what she does is she meets with Boucher, gives her money, takes the tape, but then she switches the tape. So what her plan is she's gonna give the Russians fake information that's actually not the real information that she got from Boucher. She's gonna presumably destroy that information, give it back to the Americans. So she does this, switches the tapes, but then since she's told the Americans, she's the one who tells the Americans, or maybe they find out on their own, but anyways, the Americans find out that Boucher is a traitor. So when Boucher goes to leave, she gets picked up by the Americans. Now, the Russians see this, and they think, oh no, since Jennifer Lawrence, Sparrow, was the one who was meeting with her and knew about her, obviously she's compromised, she's the one who gave the information to the Americans, and that's why they picked her up. And this is where the movie starts to not make sense to me. She says, look, now if you send me back, I can be a really effective quadruple agent for you, because I can tell the Americans, look, I've been tortured, I hate my government, they tortured me, look, I didn't give information. And I guess, so the reasoning is, since she's alive, since they didn't kill her, that means she didn't confess. So that means that as they were torturing her, she held firm and said, no, I'm not a spy, no, I'm not a spy, eventually convinced them, and they released her. So now she can go to the Americans and say, look, definitely trust me, because look, I obviously didn't admit it, because then they would have killed me. So obviously I didn't admit it. I'm still good. I'm still on your guys' side. But Jennifer Lawrence says, well, look, I'll say this to them, but really I'll be a quadruple agent for you. So this is actually a situation you can use to your advantage by releasing me, and I can be this really effective quadruple agent. So at this point, Jennifer Lawrence gets released. She's free. And understand, her whole goal is to get revenge. So she realizes the best way for her to get revenge, first of all, she pretends that she's been captured. I think this is important. She pretends that she's been kidnapped by the Americans and they're kind of holding her hostage. What she does then is she goes and tells the Russians, look, I've been captured. That's the bad news. But good news, I know who the mole is. So what you need to do is, I'm going to tell you the identity of the mole. You're going to arrest him, capture him. Don't kill him. Pretend we're going to do a hostage exchange where you're going to give the mole to the Americans, because the Americans like this guy. He's feeding them information. So you're going to pretend that you're going to give him to the Americans in exchange for me, because I'm captured. You got to get me out of here. And also, I just found you the existence of the mole. I'm a great loyal soldier of the Russians. So you've got to rescue me. But here's the beauty: you don't really have to give up anything to rescue me. Just pretend we're going to do the exchange. And then as the mole's walking over to the Americans, just shoot the mole. And that way you can kill the mole, you can also rescue me, and you can have the best of both worlds. Now, to be fair, Jennifer Lawrence seems pretty shocked by the death, where her uncle actually gets shot. So maybe that last part isn't true where she knows that they're going to kill him, but everything else is true where she says, look, I'm captured. I need you to set up this exchange for me, so that's why you need to release them all. And then the Russians just decide on their own, hey, we don't want to actually give him to the Americans. He's a traitor. We're going to shoot him. So anyways, this is how Jennifer Lawrence makes her way back to Russia, where she's a hero. And at the end, when she picks up the phone and you hear the music playing, you know on the other end, it's Nate Nash. You know it's his character because the song that's being played is a special song that she and him, they had this connection over this song. So what's implied by this is either she is continuing to work with him and feed him information, or they're just lovers and they still keep in contact, talk on the phone, and they've continued a romantic or sexual relationship. So one of those two things is implied. It's not clear which.